the ugly news of yesterday, and I do not need to be first. I prefer to be accurate and I prefer to get it right as opposed to being the first to have a hot take. You know my inclinations. I am something of a sissy. And I say I'm something of a sissy in that I would rather avoid conflict than provoke it. I would rather avoid conflict than engage in it. I would rather, I know people like to say you can defend property at all costs. I would rather let someone steal my bike, for example, than physically hurt or kill somebody in defense of material property. You can call me a sissy, you can call me a Canadian, whatever you want. I am also, not reluctant, but tend to err on the side of people should not get killed by law enforcement during uh, interactions with law enforcement, understanding obviously that there are exceptions and situations escalate, and there are circumstances where it's not only justifiable, it's necessary, right, righteous, etc. Yesterday, it was the shooting of a woman who got shot in the face and 3 times after an interaction at a stop. I mean, when we say one screen, 2 films, it's amazing that it is just that. I mean, people are looking at the same thing and they will interpret it the way they want based on their predisposed tendencies to view it the way they want or their politics to view it the way they need. And one thing we've all lived through now is, when people were calling Kyle Rittenhouse a murderer, and from initial videos, although it was much more clear cut, even with the initial videos in that case, initial videos, partial views, partial information will lead to partially defensible or partially indefensible positions. There's a certain political element to all of this, and there's a certain irony, for lack of a better word, to all of this, that every argument that was made in condemnation of Ashley Babbitt's summary execution can be made mutatis mutandis. And I know there are material distinctions and I could make them myself. That being said, I know that people are going to say this is now the less equivalent of Ashley Babbitt. You will recall when Ashley Babbitt was summarily shot point blank, climbing through a window with a backpack on her, you had the left saying, fuck around, find out. You had the left saying domestic terrorist, shot dead because engaging in domestic terrorism. And then you had the people saying it was indefensible. It was summary execution. She posed no immediate proximate threat. And then you had the others saying, well, she had a backpack on. They're defending politicians. You don't know what's in that backpack. And I know what I initially thought when I saw that video of Ashley Babbitt, in my view, getting murdered by that cop. I know what I initially thought. And it wasn't a fuck around, find out. My initial reaction was, you don't ever expect that level of finding out from that level of effing around. Growing up, and I may have shared the story, I had a friend whose friend died in a car accident. And, driving fast, whatever, fishtailing, car rolls over, he rolls through the sunroof and the car lands on his head. And there will be either heartless people out there or, people who say, well, don't do that. And that won't happen. There are levels of disproportionately impactful consequences that result from otherwise, not innocuous, but behavior that you don't necessarily foresee that. Or if it happens, it would take a very tough soul to say you deserved it. That's what you get for, driving a car a little bit recklessly. And then but for the grace of God, when I rolled my parents' Suburban, I rolled like 6 times, landed on the roof. But for the grace of God, I had a seatbelt on. The windows were open. I didn't have a limb go out and get crushed by the car. I was hanging upside down when the car came to a rest on its roof. And, other than a bruise on my hip and a story for the rest of my life, there, but for the grace of God goes I. When Ashley Babbitt got shot, I say, yeah, you're doing silly things. You don't expect to get shot in the chest for it. And whether or not this woman was doing silly things and it's going to be a justifiable shot, because unfortunately, I've now watched some analysis and agree that people are going to say justifiable but not necessary. We'll get into it. You don't expect that level of finding out from that level of effing around. And then everyone's going to point fingers and say, why did this happen? Arguably, but not arguably, this happens because people have been given the political permission slip to think that they are in their rights to interfere with police operations. And this is the whole same thing about people resisting arrest. Like, bad things happen that are exceedingly disproportionate to the initial act. When you resist arrest, things escalate instantaneously, and there are tragic consequences that result from, arguably, but not arguably, a culture of defiance, a political permission slip of defiance. Whether or not you agree with what ICE is doing, you stay out of the way, they do what they do, and if you have political problems with it, a time and a place. And it's not in interfering with, whether you think it's whatever, federal operations, that you go and do the things that people are doing. And it's like the scene from V for Vendetta, except I forget exactly which way the bad and the good was in that movie. Something happens, things escalate instantaneously, devastating consequences. And that is exactly what we witnessed yesterday. Now, I'll play the video. You've seen, it's not particularly graphic. If you're sensitive, you know, there's your warning. But initially, you see one angle. Initially, people don't even know which policeman or which ICE agent pulled the trigger. Initially, you get your rash of disinformation, your rash of hot takes, and then the information slowly trickles in. Cameras are, I think the word is ubiquitous. Hold on a second. Ubiquitous meaning. Present, appearing, found everywhere. You know you're going to get multiple angles. There's no need to jump to conclusions based on the first. I watched Andrew Branca's analysis. My initial tweet was, I'll defer to Branca on this, and I sort of said it knowing that if Branca's conclusion was, contrary to what my initial reactions were, and the defense of it was not one that I found compelling, I'd say I defer to him, but I reserve the right to disagree. Is this
President Trump and others said the federal...
Sorry. So this is now an analysis by the New York Times for the first portion of this video, and it's Branca's analysis for the second portion. We've all seen the back angles of the video, which don't tell you enough. I mean, they're so ambiguous. At first, people thought it was the cop in the behind that shot. Now we've got various angles, so listen to this. I'll play it without commentary, and then we'll talk.
President Trump and others said the federal agent was hit by the SUV, often pointing to another video filmed from a different angle. And it's true that at this moment in this grainy, low-resolution footage, it does look like the agent is...
Sorry, hold on. I just took it out. What the heck is my problem?
Synchronize it with the first clip.
That's what I get for touching my fat fingers. Let's start again. No distraction. No, let's not. Let's go. It was right from here.
And it's true that at this moment in this grainy, low-resolution footage, it does look like the agent is being struck by the SUV.
I'm going to say, even for the New York Times, that is one hell of a concession. And it's true. Looking at it afterwards in slow motion, although he has to qualify from a grainy video as if that, causes us to defy on. Yes, it's true. It looks like the ICE agent just got hit with the car. That's one hell of a big concession that the New York Times is begrudgingly forced to admit.
But when we synchronize it with the first clip, we can see the agent is not being run over. In fact, his feet are positioned away from the SUV.
That cop in front is
direct. I'll pause it there. First of all, even that argument is mildly weak. We can see that his feet it's weak when you don't understand the piece of evidence that analysis ignores. And it's one that I didn't even notice when I first saw it. And we're going to get into when Branca notes it. He's like, yeah, his feet are, he's off to the side by the time the second and third shot are fired. Branca's analysis of this one particular fact that I don't know that everybody's paying attention to or even noticed, I know that a bunch of people have, is very, very much, I would say, determinate not of anything other than the fact that, now you can talk about the subjective element of the police officer, what he thought, what he feared. Listen.
That cop in front is directly in front of her vehicle, and you can see the wheels spin in place. You see that right there? So she's stepping hard enough on the gas to spin the wheels the moment they get traction.
I got to pause it just for a second because he goes back and forth, and so it's not clear. It's spinning forward when the wheel is turning slightly to the left or straight. That's what is key in this. And bear in mind, you're talking about a decision that has to be taken in a split second. Just the wheel, because he backs up his video, looks like it's going backwards. The wheel is skidding forward, and look at the direction of the wheels as it starts skidding.
In front of her vehicle, and you can see the wheels spin in place. You see that right there? So she's stepping hard enough on the gas to spin the wheels the moment they get traction. That vehicle is shooting at the officer. The officer can see this. He can see and hear the tires spinning. So he has an audible and visual indicator that he's the innocent victim of an unlawful threat of force here. This is when, after the tire spins and the car begins to move forward, look at the front of the car lifting up under acceleration. The back of the car squats down. That car is lunging at that officer. That's when his gun comes out. Right there, goes on the windshield, and pop. That's the first shot. Pop, pop.
Now, some people are saying the second and third shot may be more or less, justifiable. And I just said I watched Branca's analysis. This was in response to, I think, the New York Times guy. The wheel is mildly seems mildly determinate in terms of what and some people are saying, well, the wheel was turning to the right by the time he shot. Well, once you see the car doing that and you hear the tires spinning and screeching, do you have enough time? I mean, in a perfect world, yeah. And in a perfect world, maybe someone's going to say, well, the worst thing that happens to the cop is he gets his leg run over. You don't have to kill somebody. I can tell you one thing also. My father, once upon a time, back when he was practicing as a younger lawyer, had a case where a girl was run over by a bus. And the different circumstances, the bus was resting on the girl's leg. And for whatever the reason, unless I'm misremembering the story, the bus driver wouldn't move. And so the bus was crushing her bone. And by the time they finally moved the bus, it passed around all of the crushed and damaged bone and muscle tissue that had been pulverized. And it caused, I would say, kidney failure. I remember saying she went blind in the hospital before she died. And it was horrible. Yeah, so people say, yeah, he should have dealt with a broken leg or the risk of a broken leg before opening fire. Ideally, morally, legally, and Branca goes through the 5 criteria: imminent risk of harm, the unlawful aggression, the other criteria, and I think he makes a sensible and compelling case without undermining the level of the tragedy that this is. And I won't be the ones to say, fuck around, find FAFO. This is whether or not it's a justified shoot. And I think, people who pay attention and know the law will probably begrudgingly come to that conclusion. It's a PR disaster one way or the other. You know that you're going to have the politicians of the world using this for their political fodder. And we're, not far from that. I'll come back to it in a second. A number of people out there were sharing this, which is interesting because I'll read the caption. The ICE agent involved in yesterday's Minneapolis shooting was previously dragged over 300 feet by this illegal alien child rapist from Guatemala being harbored by Minnesota fraud governor Tim Walz. So there's a political description to that. And my first reaction was, what difference does it make? My second reaction was, if this makes him, the guy who shot her, now suffering from some form of PTSD where he's more trigger happy or trigger prone, maybe it's not the best argument in the world, but a counter argument that I saw, which I find more compelling than my initial reaction, is it means that this guy knows what happens, what the risks are when somebody uses their car as a weapon, deliberately or accidentally, and he knew the sounds, he knows how it works, and he knows the risks, and he was protecting himself and his fellow ICE agents. I haven't actually watched the video.
According to a federal complaint, agents were executing a warrant for 39-year-old Roberto Carlos Munoz. They say Munoz entered the country unlawfully, and he also pled guilty to 4th-degree criminal sexual conduct back in 2023 for abusing a minor. Tuesday morning, agents pulled him over. Court documents say he repeatedly refused to comply before a federal agent took out his spring-loaded window punch with his right hand and broke the driver's side rear window. These images show the officer's hand in the vehicle. In this video, you can see the driver take off with the agent hanging from the car, dragging him 300 feet through front yards. These graphic images show the aftermath. A bloody agent who needed 33 stitches for his significant cuts.
Oh, gosh.
And now political...
By the way, that is awfully close. Hold on, look over here, right there. That is awfully close to the brachial artery. You'll bleed out in 90 seconds if you sever your brachial artery. And there's a bunch of videos of people punching through windows, severing their brachial arteries, and the blood splats out, and it's so bright red. It's just horrifying.
cuts. And now a political battle with a top Homeland Security official criticizing Governor Tim Walz, posting on X, instead of comparing ICE law enforcement to the Gestapo, Walz should be thanking our brave law enforcement. The Department
We can pause it. Well, let's just play it out.
of Justice says a request for Munoz to be held out.
Okay, we can get rid of that. So the cop has lived through this, knows how quickly it happens, knows how dangerous it can get instantaneously. And you got a woman, whether or not she was part of the we'll find out all the details. I know she's been identified in a lesbian woman with 3 kids and a poetry winner, and people are making fun of her poetry, and people are, running around. Oh, she had the rainbow flag in her profile. F around, find out. I mean, you don't have to lose your humanity in adjudicating that something was legally necessary or at least legally justifiable, and appreciate the PR nightmare that it's going to be, because whether you agree with it or not, it will be exploited and weaponized by the political adversaries, understandably so, predictably so, and easily so. They're going to now say this is the equivalent of Ashley Babbitt. Oh, I say it's not. There was no 1 ton object of devastation that the person was in control of. Ashley Babbitt had a backpack, though. The left could say, well, that backpack could have had bombs in it. Well, it didn't, but he doesn't know that when he pulls the trigger. When Michael Byrd pulled that trigger, he could have killed anybody behind him. He could have killed the law enforcement that was behind Ashley Babbitt. And whether or not breaking windows and trying to crawl, get through a door is dumb behavior. And maybe you'll get arrested and maybe you'll get persecuted. You don't expect to get shot once in the chest and killed. Now, this woman, whether or not she thought she had the political permission slip to interfere with ICE operations because they're the new Gestapo, made a momentary or strategic mistake. It escalated faster than anybody could imagine. And a 37-year-old mother of 3, you're not going to have people buying that this was an act of domestic terrorism. And you know that you're going to have the same political scumbags who gave her the permission slip to get there in the first place, invoking it now and riding her death for their own political purposes. What was it? I always quote Tom McDonald. They kill you and then they broadcast it and make it the news. Listen to Michael. Jacob Frey. I hope it's Jacob Frey. If it's Jacob Fry, that would be embarrassing for me. Jacob Frey. Listen to him capitalizing off this woman's death.
There's little I can say, again, that'll make this situation better, but I do have a message for our...
There's little I can say, but I got to say something, and I got the mic. I want my soundbite. There's little I can say. He's such a tough man. Listen to this.
There's little I can say, again, that'll make this situation better, but I do have a message for our community, for our city, and I have a message for ICE.
Oh, he's tough.
To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis.
Oh, here's his moment. You can't handle the truth. Jacob Fry, a man who's in love with himself, he probably rehearsed that in the mirror. How am I going to say it? Do I put the emphasis on fuck or get? Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Or do I emphasize all of them? Get the fuck. Oh, do I do a little AOC clap? Get the. What a jackass.
Get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
We don't want you here. That's funny. Where do I remember that phrase historically? Here's a thing. When it comes to enforcing federal law, you don't have a choice, Jacob. And maybe if you didn't talk like such a tough guy, you wouldn't encourage unarmed civilians driving their vehicles on their way to pick up their kids from daycare to not act like vigilantes, not act like righteous protesters interfering with federal ICE operations. Maybe if you didn't talk like that in the first place. You may not like it. You may think it's unfair. Radicalizing people to mobilize, to interfere with federal law enforcement after they've been given sanctuary in sanctuary cities. How about you say get the F out to criminals and to illegals? No, we don't want to do that. We want to say get the F out to the federal authorities who enforce federal law that would, whether you like it or not, get illegal aliens and criminals off the streets. But no, it's not his wife. It's not his daughter. Someone else's. They'll get to use it. It's good political fodder. It's good for ratings, right, Jacob? It's good for political. It's good for politics. You don't need to throw a brick through your window right now. You just can now go and martyrize a woman who's dead because, from what I understand, she was organizing a convoy or facilitating a convoy or interfering with ICE operations, and she felt morally, righteously justified in doing so. Get the. So that's it. It's unfortunate. It's gross. It's ugly. People should not be rejoicing in it. People should not be doing anything other than understanding it's going to be a PR disaster. It's going to mobilize other people to do similar things, if not worse. In as much as it could have been avoided, ought to have been avoided, to the extent it happened the way it did. The law is the law, and the reality is the reality of what went down. But people jumping to their own respective conclusions, politically motivated, are not going to bother to get the facts that might cause them to second guess or question their initial reaction. And they're sure as hell going to weaponize the disinformation, which incidentally, the description of this event coming from both sides, you could have drafted it knowing how both sides wanted to depict it. And suffice to say that the reality of what occurred is not somewhere in the middle, but definitely not as extreme as it might have been initially described, maybe because people only had one angle of it. But the bottom line remains, yeah, the cop standing in front of that car who had seen this happen before and very nearly could have died the time before, you hear a tire screeching, you see that tire screeching, and that is in your direction, and you're in front of the car with another cop with his hands through the window. It's probably going to go down as legally justified, and it's a tragedy regardless, and you can acknowledge that it was legally justified without trying to berate the deceased. And while fully acknowledging it, it will have political ramifications, regardless of whether or not they are legally justified political ramifications.